Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, comrades. And this is the just after the 200th anniversary of the double debt imposed on Haiti, and in my view, the beginning of the first real attempt at neocolonialism rather than the kind of old-fashioned kind. So 200 years ago, the formerly enslaved population of the French colony of Saint-Domingue defeated a French colonial army and declared the independent Republic of Haiti. 20 years later, a French naval blockade forced the government of Haiti to agree to pay an indemnity of 150 million francs to compensate their former enslavers. In order to finance this, the Haitian government contracted a number of loans from French-owned banks that left the country impoverished and underdeveloped, paving the way for the US invasion and occupation. Under the pressure of the Haitian Revolution, which broke out in the French colony of Saint-Domingue in August 1791, enslavement was abolished in all the overseas colonies of the French Empire in 1794. Napoleon Bonaparte attempted to restore slavery in 1802, but by defeating a French invasion force, the formerly enslaved Africans remained free. On the 1st of January 1804, Saint-Domingue proclaimed its independence and renamed itself by its old indigenous name, Haiti. The young republic was, however, not recognized by any of the imperialist powers for the next 20 years. Alexandre Pétion, the first president of the Republic of Haiti, had suggested paying an indemnity in return for recognition in 1814. At that time, Pétion only controlled the south of Haiti. The north was ruled by Henri Christophe, who strongly opposed any such deal. I say strongly opposed. He actually had the French ambassador shot, which is about as strong an opposition as you can get. In 1820, following the death of Henri Christophe, the country was reunited under Jean-Pierre Boyer, who was the successor to Pétion and shared his political outlook. King Charles X of France recognized that a reconquest of Haiti was impossible. So he sought to extract as much as he could from a people that he still considered to be rebellious slaves. On the 17th of April 1825, he issued a proclamation granting to his former colony an independence that had been held de facto since the beginning of the century. The conditions of the ordinance included the payment of an indemnity of 150 million francs payable in 5 years to the former French colonists, the former French enslavers. A substantial naval force arrived in Haiti in July 1825 and threatened to blockade the ports and bombard Port-au-Prince unless the government submitted, which they did. To settle the first instalment of 30 million francs payable in December 1825, the Haitian government had to seek a loan in Paris. However, the Paris bankers, kept as a commission a percentage of the amount borrowed. The government of Haiti was therefore going to receive 24 million from the consortium of bankers, but would have to repay 30 million. Now that's 20%. And they would have to pay interest on that 30 million to the bankers. To put this in perspective, a French franc in 1825 was worth about 2 shillings in English money, which would be the equivalent of about £100 today. So the 150 million francs is of the same order of magnitude as the 20 million pounds sterling paid to the slave owners at compensation at abolition in the British Empire. This led to a double debt. The Republic of Haiti still owed 126 million to the former slave owners and now 30 million to the financial services industry in France, making a total debt of 156 million francs, even before paying interest. The government of Haiti could not afford to pay the next instalment on the indemnity and failed to service the debt in 1826 and 1827. In Haiti, this indemnity was extremely unpopular, and there was an armed uprising in the north of the country, which was viciously repressed by the Boyer government. In this agricultural country, the burden of paying the independence debt had to rest essentially on the shoulders of the poor peasants. The governing oligarchy, of which President Boyer was the principal representative, can be seen as an early example of a comprador bourgeoisie, who acted as intermediaries, ultimately representing the interests of the ruling class of the former colonizing power while corruptly enriching themselves. A modern example would be Hastings Banda of Malawi. This debt overwhelmed the economy of the young Haitian Republic. The country found itself held hostage economically. This double debt of independence was the strategy put in place by the former colonial power to maintain an unofficial hegemony over a rebellious, as they considered it, rebellious former colony. Napoleon had sent the biggest military expedition ever to cross the Atlantic, and it had been soundly defeated. Since then, the people of Haiti had been organized into armed militias. Threatening to bomb Port-au-Prince from the sea was one thing. A full-scale land invasion, a completely different matter. And the French authorities were well aware that actually reconquering Haiti would have been impossible. So, who paid this debt? The Haitian bourgeoisie had tried from Toussaint Louverture onwards to restore plantation monocrop agriculture. The peasants, having fought so hard for their freedom from enslavement on the plantations, very strongly resisted this and clearly preferred farming their own lands as family farms. The need to pay the double debt gave the Haitian government an argument to attempt to impose capitalist agriculture. The Code Rural, the law of the country, as it were, of the 6th of May 1826, aimed to encourage peasants to work in capitalist agriculture. Anyone who did not have a job had to work the land. This attempt to strengthen the plantation economy was not a success. The rural masses were able to maintain their hold on the land and resist complete proletarianization, but they were not able to take political power from the landowners and the bourgeoisie. The peasants wanted to establish a version of the African village life from which they'd been kidnapped and enslaved, while the bourgeoisie wanted to be part of the world capitalist system through which they sought to enrich themselves. This stalemate inhibited the development of a fully capitalist economy without allowing for a viable alternative. Sugar production continued to decline. So it was coffee, more adapted to family farming, which would be the commodity that would provide tax revenues to pay the indemnity. This tax burden fell heavily onto these peasant farmers, while the government and ruling class did not feel the weight of the debt directly. On the other hand, the urban bourgeoisie was precisely the group most at risk from the French Navy, who, being unable to invade, could have bombarded and blockaded the main ports where they lived. As always, the comprador bourgeoisie preferred to repress and extort their own citizens rather than to oppose the demands of the imperialists, particularly when they see a way of corruptly enriching themselves in the process. So, who gained from the 1825 double debt? Firstly, the former colonial landowners and enslavers. Secondly, the creditors, to whom the former colonists owed considerable sums for their purchase of plantations or enslaved workers. French commodity traders who profited from the opening of the Haitian market to French ships were another group that profited, but the real winners were the financial intermediaries, the financial services industry in Paris, who arranged the loans and took enormous commissions. Following the 1830 July Revolution in France, King Charles X was replaced by his cousin, King Louis Philippe, and the debt was renegotiated, but only reduced to 90 million francs, leaving still a debt of 60 million. And of course, they still owed for loan of the 30 millions in the first place, that they borrowed to pay the first tranche of the indemnity. After half a century of crushing payments tied to the double debt, they had nearly been repaid by 1880. Then a French bank, Crédit Industriel et Commercial, CIC, offered to help Haiti set up its own national bank. The Banque Nationale de Haïti, the National Bank of Haiti, was Haitian in name only. It was owned and administered from Paris by CIC, which took a commission on nearly every transaction the Haitian government made. The CIC siphoned tens of millions of dollars out of Haiti, while saddling the country with still more loans. After Haiti's other debts were deducted, the government was left with 6 cents of every $3 collected with which to run the country. 5 years earlier, in 1875, CIC had lent the Haitian government 36 million francs for major infrastructure projects, of which 20% was intended to pay off the last of the debt linked to the former enslavers' original compensation of 150 million francs. The French bankers took 40% of the loan in commissions and fees. The balance paid off old debts or disappeared into the pockets of corrupt Haitian politicians. Very little of the 1875 loan was used for any projects that might benefit ordinary Haitians. The debt to CIC gave the bank a powerful lever, and when the National Bank of Haiti was established, CIC took over the country's treasury operations, printing money, receiving taxes, and paying government salaries. All decisions were made by the board of directors in Paris, composed of French bankers and businessmen. In the second half of the 19th century, global demand for coffee was high, and Haiti's economy was built around it. But the government lost much of its coffee taxes to the former slaveholders and then to CIC. But when coffee prices plummeted in the 1890s, Haiti export taxes on coffee were more than the price of the coffee itself. The Haitian government borrowed its way out of this untenable situation with another loan, this time 50 million francs from the National Bank of Haiti, thence from Paris. In October 1910, following a public campaign, Haitian President Antoine Simon revoked the National Bank of Haiti's concession, causing it to close. He granted, however, the concession for issuing currency and other government treasury operations to the newly formed Banque Nationale de la République d'Haïti, the National Bank of the Republic of Haiti, the headquarters of which were in Paris, but we now know that the National City Bank of New York also had a considerable finance in this, and there were offices of the of the Banque Nationale de la République d'Haïti in New York. This new national bank continued charging the government for every deposit and expense while generating big profits for its shareholders abroad. It also issued another loan to the Haitian government. After commissions and profits were deducted, the government of Haiti received $9 million US, but still had to repay the full face value of $12 million. Moreover, auditors found considerable discrepancies between the amount of money listed on its deposit ledgers and the actual amounts held in its safes. This, however, was successfully covered up when the US government sent in the Marines in 1915. The US government had long wanted to intervene in Haiti to rewrite the constitution that forbade foreigners from owning property. New York financial interests, led by the National City Bank, encouraged US military intervention. The overthrow of President Villebron-Sam of Haiti on the 28th of July 1915 and the subsequent civil disturbances gave the US President Woodrow Wilson the final excuse to order the invasion of Haiti to protect, as he put it, to protect American business interests and restore order. The invasion forces used 40% of Haiti's national income to pay its final remittance, to repay debts to North American and French banks until 1934. Haiti would not pay its final remittance to the National City Bank until 1947, when a United Nations report stated that the people of Haiti are often close to starvation. So why did the government of Haiti pay the indemnity? The threat posed by French gunboats in Port-au-Prince harbour was, of course, a powerful incentive. But once they departed, the government could have repudiated the deal. Pétion and Boyer had long wanted to restore plantation economy, plantation agriculture, and the need to pay the double debt gave them the excuse to impose the Code Rural in 1826. Both presidents had spent their youth in France, this is before the revolution, and had been officers in the French army, only changing sides and joining the revolution when it was obvious that the French invasion was going to fail. They had much more in common culturally and economically with the French bourgeoisie than with the poor Haitian peasantry. Having been removed from office by a peasant uprising in 1873, Boyer lived his remaining years in Paris. The Haitian bourgeoisie and landowners wanted diplomatic recognition from France, which would lead to recognition from other imperialist countries in order to enable full commercial relations with Europe and North America. The nature of the loans gave them opportunities for graft and corruption. They would profit from such commerce and corruption while the poor farmers paid the debts. The French government's desire to exert neo-colonial control over Haiti through financial demands backed by armed forces led the Haitian government to contract a debt they could not afford to service. The rapacious banks, particularly CIC and National City Bank, charged exorbitant interest rates and commission. The setting up of the national banks was little more than a confidence trick to rob the country's exchequer. In this way, they were aided by the corrupt ruling class of Haiti, and when this started to unravel, the US government sent in the Marines. President Aristide, I would argue the first honest leader of Haiti since Henri Christophe, demanded $21 billion in reparations from France and its banks over the double debt. For this, he was removed in a coup d'etat organized by the French and US governments. I would argue that that demand is still outstanding from the people of Haiti. It's their money and they want it back. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve. I think you deserve an applaud on that one. Once again, the poor pays the price. And we see the way in which the Haitian bourgeoisie colludes with that to make the poor suffer. And it's not surprising that today we're campaigning for France to repay Haiti. Many of you on this Zoom meeting, I'm sure, would be aware of the reparations movement, and that the French being asked to repay Haiti is part of our reparations movement. I'll open the floor to questions. If you would raise the hand, and we can see it. If I don't see the hands on my screen, maybe somebody can point out to me if there's any hands. I see Stacy Anley. Stacy, would you like to take the floor now? Right, unmute. Thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Paul Phoenix, and I'm sitting here speaking on behalf of Stacy Anley. Thank you very much for this meeting, and we are very honored and good to be able to ask questions. What the main question that is facing us, what was the international democratic community doing at the time when France was extorting this amount of money from Haiti, which in today's standards is tantamount to a mugging? So why did the international community sit by and let France carry on with its illegal extortion of monies from Haiti? Has anyone questioned that?
Thank you. We'll come back to Steve on that. Steve, would you prefer a couple of questions in the lineup and then answer, or you'll take this one now?
I'll take this one now while people think of other things. Right, the major imperialist powers of the time in that region were the United States and Great Britain. Neither power wanted to fall out, as it were, with France. They were trading with Haiti, but they would not offer them recognition. This in part because, of course, the British Empire had great interest in the Caribbean, the British West Indies of the day. The United States was still running a slave economy in its southern states, and the example of enslaved workers freeing themselves was something that they hated. So the idea of it being illegal, I think that's a bit of a 20th century concept. I don't really think that British, French, and North American imperialism thought of anything other than their right to send their gunboats wherever they liked. This wasn't the only place they sent their gunboats. The French bombarded Veracruz. They invaded Mexico. The French and the British blockaded Buenos Aires, and so on. So I think, and then because we lead up to what was known as the Scramble for Africa. So they were in competition, the various powers. They were in competition, but they had a common interest in maintaining the system of imperialism.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just take the next 3 questions and then we'll move on to the next speaker. People can hold the questions at the end of the other speaker if they get to miss out on asking Steve a question. I've got Cecil Gutsmore next,
sorry,
and then
before you continue, Luke,
Yeah.
Satish says that he's been trying to raise his hand as well.
Okay.
Satish Sakal.
Okay, we'll make that
Yeah.
That'll be the final one we'll do. So
Okay.
that'll be the 4th one. So it'll be Cecil, you'll take the floor next, and then Glenroy Watson, and then Dr. Bobby Shaw, in that order. Thanks. If you put your question. Thanks, Cecil. Come in. You need to unmute yourself, Cecil. Cecil, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Briefly then, Steve, thanks for going as wide as you did into the economic history of Haiti and the relationship to this compensation exploitation. I think that it's necessary, or do you think it's necessary to remind that the extraction wasn't just a French extraction, that the 1825 money was raised as part of an international consortium, and that if one just confines it to France, one isn't able to see exactly what happened in the subsequent period, nor indeed how the international nature of that actual transaction.
Thanks. And Glenroy, you want to put your question?
Yeah. Greetings.
Hi,
Yes,
hi,
greetings,
Benoit.
Luke.
Good to see you.
Greetings, Steve. Yes, greetings to the house. You can hear me, yeah?
Mhm.
Yes, for sure. Thanks,
Okay.
Benoit.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
much along the same line as Cecil, because I think that when you think of the players in this whole scenario who continue to play the same sort of game vis-a-vis exploitation, it's wider, extremely wider than France. And when we think of reparation, we have to include all of the robbers and murderers, because it's not just the bankers. The bankers obviously have a key role to play, and they must be highlighted. But the individuals who have profited from it, the bankers and the investors and so on, need to be exposed. And on the issue of international solidarity at the time, I mean, we should remember that it wasn't just France that invaded Haiti. It also included Britain and Spain, trying their luck to capture that property. But really, I want to ask, can we include in the public information when we talk of reparation those players that we know were involved and profited from it, as you said, the amount of people who do, including some of the people in Haiti who exploited it. We need to expose it historically. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Steve, one more, and then I'll give you a chance to reply. Dr. Bobby Shaw, you want to come in with your question?
Yes, good morning. I'm going to have to leave very shortly, but I thank you for the information again. But this is something I believe in: action planning. That means that we know the history. We know the history. So what is it that we as a group or in our individual community can join together? What actions can we offer to just, rather than just dialogue about the history? As a psychologist, one of the things that I try to do is that, as my colleague here in the United States often say, education. But how do we begin to learn? How do we begin to teach, and so that the people who have had learned helplessness in Haiti, because Haiti are the victims right now, learn, or who have learned, may have learned to be helpless, what action plans, and I put this on the table for us so that we can, when we come back together, because I hope this is just the beginning, we could come together in a united way with an action plan, no matter how small the steps are, in order to bring some actions and some solution. We should never rest when a country like Haiti is in the situation that the first and only Black-owned country. So we should never rest, and that came from Dr. King. We as well. So that's all I have to say, is that I love this. Thank you for the information. I have another meeting that I have to be at 9 o'clock. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it. But I am into action planning, and not just reliving and talking about the history that, we all probably are aware of it, but what do we do with it? What do we do with it?
Thank you so much for your question. I can assure you that a lot of people on this Zoom would be engaged one way or the other in fighting for reparations. I was on a Zoom meeting the other night with saying how the Americans are actually handling this in the US, and I congratulate you on the work that they've been able to force many of the states to start to consider and pay reparations. We from the Caribbean, we've got a 10-point CARICOM plan, and there's other plans going. The Pan-Africanists, and we're all engaged in fighting. So I can assure you, we're action-oriented.
Thank you so much.
So
Have a
thanks
great
very
day,
much.
everybody.
Thanks for joining the platform. Steve, you want to come in?
Sorry, there is Satish Luke.
Oh yes,
who's
okay.
been trying. And before
yeah.
anyone else leaves, I'm going to post details of how you can become a member of CLS, and also the history of what we do. Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, we'll take that. I see Tree's hand is up too, but we need to move on to the next speaker. So I'll just take Satish and Tweed if you can, unless it's a short one. Maybe we'll take you as well. Satish, are you ready?
Yeah. I'd like to sort of say to Steve, I think you got your date slightly wrong in relation to Boyer. I think he was removed from power in 1843, not 1873. And I also think it needs to be mentioned that, well, a couple of things, one of which is I don't see Henri Christophe as being much of the solution, because while he may not have favoured the capitalistic approach of the South, i.e. Boyer in particular, he brought in a form of feudalism. And if you actually look at the power structure in the north of Haiti, he was the king. He had feudal lords underneath him. So it really wasn't this egalitarian revolutionary government in the north of Haiti at that particular time. And I think we also need to mention that while we talk about how bad the French was and the invasion, we shouldn't forget Britain tried and failed miserably to invade and take Haiti between 1793 or 4 and 1798. And it coincided with the absolute disaster of Napoleon's policies immediately afterwards. Britain never was so weak as it was after the effective defeat, the Haiti defeat in 1798. And it's no coincidence that very shortly after that, there was the Wolf Tone Rising in Ireland. It needs to be mentioned that this whole impact of the Haitian Revolution isn't confined to that island. It extended all over the world. The United States would never have become a superpower if it wasn't for Haiti. That needs to be mentioned in the demands for what I would call restitution. Let's have restitution first, return all the stolen money, then we'll talk about reparations as well.
Okay, thank you, Satish. Well, Steve, sorry, I'm going to load you with one more tweet who is a regular on our platform. So this will be the last question coming to you now,
Hi,
Steve.
thank you. So thanks, Steve. Thanks. Okay, so just a quick pop in. I noticed the I don't know if the lady's still there, and this is not historic, but this is bringing it today. And I need to mention. I've seen the Haiti lawyer and other people stepping up and in solidarity with all the action that's happening in Sahel with Burkina Faso and Niger in that area. So for anyone that is, it's not directly linked to reparations, but the anyone that's watching that area, I mean, you can hear the voices and the movement spreading quite far and wide. There were solidarity, about 1,000 people in London, April the 30th. So I just wanted to pop that in, that you know the tide is turning and the flow is really, it seems to be really strong now. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, Steve.
Right, yeah, you're quite correct. It's 1843. I'm a bit dyslexic and I get 4s and 7s muddled up. I wrote it as 43. I read it as 73, and so you're absolutely correct on that one. This was a bit simplified. I've Monthly Review Journal in New York are going to publish this later in the year, a longer version of what I've just said as an article. So I've gone into things in somewhat greater depth there, including the international nature of the French government and the French banks were the major, how can I say, the major culprits, if you will, of the first, the 1825. The fact that the British government and the United States government would not recognize Haiti until the French government had was actually an act of collaboration with French imperialism. And they were far more interested in maintaining the imperialist order. If we then go to the 1875 debt and the further sort of shenanigans about the National Bank of Haiti and so on, yes, that was, there were French, German, Belgian, and North American financiers involved in this. It was organized out of Paris, but there was money coming from those other, from financiers and banks in those other countries. An increasing amount from the United States, as the national city bank slowly took over the whole matter. Let us say the CIC still exists in France. When I was a student in France, I had my bank account with them, and they're still there. So they're still there, perhaps as a target for our French comrades, because that brings me to what we can do. And I think we just have to weave this in to the whole reparations movement. It's one more argument. It gives us maybe one more chance to publicize the matter. It gives us a possibility for international links between activists. There is a growing reparations movement in France itself. It's early days in many ways, but it's growing, and I think that there's been some important initiatives, particularly over the question of Haiti, and there's and so on. So I think we have to link this in as just one more thing. It's not just, oh, we want 21 billion here, we want this there, we want that there. I think, we're saying this is how it's all, how much they've made out of it. We can take individual examples, but I think it's important that we say this is just one more crime placed at the door of the door of the banks, their governments, the imperialist system generally. And yes, Britain, the British government tried to conquer Haiti, but they couldn't do it. And so that's, I think, after having been defeated, they withdrew a bit, but they're still basically just as guilty as anyone else. And it was that international system that, while they were fighting wars with each other, they were intent on fighting a global war against what we might call the people of the rest of the world. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. We shall move on to the next speaker in a moment. I wanted to give Jean Tate, if she's there. I'm not seeing your name up here. I promised to give you a chance to mention your book, your new book that's coming out. If you're there, Jean, you there? Okay, thanks. Can you take the floor for a minute and just tell us about your new book that's coming out? Thank you.
Yep. This is a book that it's about the life of Anselm Samuel, that many of you will know, and it's about his life. It's his memoirs, and it's let's see, there's the book. You can see it. A rather fine picture of when he first arrived in Britain in the 1950s, so it deals with his life. From starting with in the steel band movement at the time when it was more or less illegal as a badge on in Renegade Steel Band, and he continued to migrate to this country. He was involved with weightlifting, Renegades, training Arnold Schwarzenegger, involved in black politics in this country as a Black Panther and the Black movement generally. Very active in the carnival movement here at Notting Hill, steel band, and costume bands, and he was involved with supporting the Grenada Revolution, and he and I took a youth group to Grenada during the revolution there, and a lot of other issues about struggles for proper youth work, innovative youth work that actually was anti-racist and not very patronizing and racist towards a lot of the black young people at that time. So it's basically, it's one of the many untold stories of Black people in this country, struggles and the activism of those people over a period of 60, 70 years. Sam is now in his 90s, so he's not as fit as he was, but he's still there. And we've just produced this book. So on Saturday, the 10th of May, there's going to be a book launch in Islington. I'll put the details on the chat. If anybody would like to come, you're all very welcome. And Sam will be there to sign books and discuss
Great.
with you and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean. And if you put in the chat there, where people might be able to buy the book as well, if there's a place for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, we got our next speaker, Winston Coard. Sorry to keep you waiting for such a long time, but I'm sure we'll have enough time to have a good discussion after you've spoken to us. Please take the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I just want to organize the material around the role of the International Monetary Fund in the perpetuation of neocolonialism in the global South, or the global majority, however you wish to express it, because we know of the many unequal nature of trade and so on between the various countries. But the fact of the matter is that the World Bank plays a certain role in terms of favoring certain types of financing within third world countries, and of course, not financing others, but the IMF's role is more central, I think, and more significant and devastating in terms of its use as an instrument of control. So let me just list, first of all, what I consider to be the four main roles or functions of the International Monetary Fund in perpetuating and even aggravating issues of neocolonialism around the world. First of all, it's the collective agency, it's a collection agency for foreign capital. Secondly, it makes countries more attractive for foreign capital, takeover of their economies, and of course, seeking more surplus from these poor countries. Thirdly, it is used to facilitate regime change. And fourthly, it is a major source of long-term, permanent political and economic control of these countries by the imperialist powers. So one, it's a collection agency. Two, it's used as for foreign economic takeover and increased extraction of profits by the wealthy countries. Thirdly, it facilitates regime change operations. And fourthly, it maintains and strengthens economic and political control over these various countries on a long-term or permanent basis. The thing is that when we look at, for example, the first point about collection agency for foreign capital, a very interesting example and recent example was what happened in 2013. That's what, 12 years ago, when one of the many IMF programs to which Jamaica entered since the mid-70s, was signed and set up. And it involved the question of how to generate the sort of income that was required for basic parts of the program. And they decided that they would not take away any of the entitlements of foreign capital, but that local Jamaican capitalists who had bought government bonds, local debt, in other words, to the more wealthy citizens of Jamaica, they would take a haircut. In fact, they took 2 haircuts over the next 3 years. So they had a reduction in their payments from the bonds that they had purchased, namely the loans that provided the Jamaica government, whereas foreign capital did not have 1 cent removed, right? They had to be given the full payment of their bonds on maturity and full interest required at quarterly intervals. So that you see the favoring of foreign capital when both local and foreign capital took out loans against the government of Jamaica. One got favored treatment and the other, in fact, had to take, as it turned out, 2 haircuts. Moving on quickly, let me say that the underlying character of IMF policies are what I would call demand squeeze rather than supply expansion. By that I mean the policies of the IMF seek to, in fact, reduce the amount of demand within the system, demand by government for goods and services, demand by citizens, by workers, demand from the government budget, because cuts in the government budget, in fact, means less demand by government of goods and services in the country for the servicing of the population. So that in many different ways, demand is being squeezed. Now, when you squeeze demand in a situation where you're trying to arrange for the country to have its GDP, its gross domestic product, grow, the economy grow, so that it can pay off its debt, foreign and local debt, to in fact squeeze demand on several fronts and in several different ways seems to be against a policy of trying to expand the economy, the gross domestic product, so as to be able to pay off the debt. So it's significant that a demand squeeze approach is used, not an approach that says, let us put resources into increasing agricultural output, increasing manufacturing, increasing all the different sectors of the economy so that there's more money available to pay off the debt. So virtually all of IMF policies throughout the years, and basically they use this same model, one size fits all in country after country. The objective is, in fact, to squeeze demand as the way out of the crisis, or supposedly the way out of the crisis. It really isn't, rather than to implement policies that will expand output in different sectors of the economy and therefore the economy as a whole. Moving on quickly, let us look at the actual, the goals of IMF policies in the context of demand constriction rather than supply growth. One, these are the demands of the IMF to whichever government goes to them. And governments go to the IMF because of balance of payments problems, because they're importing more than they're exporting on the particular model of development that they're using. And therefore, there comes a point when they run out of foreign exchange. And it is at that point that they usually go on their knees or on their stomach to the IMF asking for loans. At that point now, the IMF can basically dictate to them whatever they wish. And so the model is that repaying of government debt, especially foreign debt, is #1 priority. Number 2 is improve the balance of payments through export growth and cuts in imports. We'll look briefly at why that is impractical. It doesn't happen in practice. Thirdly, but that's part of the IMF policies and package officially. 3, make the country more attractive to foreign investors so that they become the principal engine of economic growth. Now, that is so because everybody's being squeezed, even the local capitalists get squeezed. so that foreign capital, direct investment mostly, is the key to how they are claiming the economy can be put on a footing of growth so that it will eventually get out of the problem of the balance of payments trap. Never doesn't happen, but that's what the policies are supposedly aimed at doing. 4, they place as much, preferably all, of the economy, the productive enterprises, into private hands, especially, most particularly, foreign investor hands. That is the strategy. In other words, because they're squeezing all of the local demand, the only source of development, quote unquote development, has to come from foreign private investors, usually aimed at attracting foreign tourists, which is one form of export industry, although it takes place on the soil, but it's called an export, service exports, and other export items, free zone production, etc., different techniques, but it's all aimed at foreign direct investment as the source, the impetus, the basis, the engine, supposedly, for economic growth in the economy. Doesn't work, but that's their model. Fourthly, they place as much, preferably all of the economy, that is the productive enterprises, into private hands, especially foreign investment hands. I think I made that point already. The burden of improvement of the economy falls massively, indeed exclusively, on the shoulders and backs of working people. Everyone also needs incentives except workers. Workers and small farmers don't need incentives. Only foreign and local capital, especially foreign capital, they're the ones who need incentives. So all the laws are structured in that way. The tax arrangements are structured in that way. Now, moving on, the IMF tax package, the actual package that they impose on all of these countries, which they call conditionalities, and they attach specific numbers and percentages to, so that they can measure whether you've achieved it or not. And if you don't, they stop sending in any more of the tranche of money. So you get cut off in the midstream and the economy collapses, which is what happened with the first loan of recent times. That was between 2007 and 2009. The government couldn't meet it, and that policy collapsed, and the situation got worse because there was no immediate injections of money. Although even when there were more injections of money for other reasons and techniques, it also failed. So you have, first of all, devaluation. The first policy is devaluation. The aim of that is to make imports more expensive, because when your currency is devalued, it means it's now cheaper than other currencies with which it deals. So therefore, the prices of what you sell to the world fall. You become more competitive. That's the argument. And so you end up selling more exports. That's the argument. Don't believe it, but that's the argument. And on the other hand, imports become more expensive because other people's currencies are now more valuable in relation to your currency. And so it costs more, it raises the cost of living, it squeezes the working people in that way too. But most important, it forces a reduction in the amount of imports. And therefore, imports are falling, exports are supposedly rising, and therefore, are creating a surplus of foreign exchange in order to restore the balance so that you get out of the problem of the balance of payments deficit or failure in the economy. That's theory. The cuts in government program. Sorry, the next one after devaluation is tax increases, right? No, devaluation, of course, hits the poor people, working people, because everything becomes more expensive, because everything that's imported is now more expensive because of the fall in the value of your currency compared to foreign currencies in which their foreign goods are denominated. So you have devaluation causing a squeeze in what working people's income can buy. Then you have tax increases, mostly indirect taxes, In fact, some policies want to lower the tax rate for income tax, that the better off can pay. But mostly they use indirect taxes that hit working people very hard. You can buy very little without paying tax. Thirdly, wage restraints, quote unquote. which in practice often means wage freeze or something very close to wage freeze. So again, you're squeezing workers at a time when prices of everything are going up. Then there's cuts in government revenues. They demand, in fact, cutbacks in education, cutbacks in health, cutbacks in this, that, and the other. Nowadays, they like to say, they used to say that openly. Now they say, oh, we're not going to cut social programs, but we're going to cut everything else. That's a game, because when you actually look at the figures, they're still cutting across the board, just to different degrees. Then number 5, they privatize state assets. They demand that the state sector, even those companies that are making significant profits, must be privatized, must be handed over to the private sector, local and foreign, mostly foreign. Then number 6, removal of price controls. So for example, like in Grenada, we had 40 items since colonial days. There were 40 items on the price control list, sardines, corned beef, flour, rice, basic things that the poorest people use every week. And they said, no price control, remove price control altogether. So that's part of their policy all around the world. They make you remove price control. You know what that does again for poor people's income. So the whole IMF policies is staged. Every aspect of its policies are there to squeeze the poorest people in the country as a way to supposedly get out of the crisis. Then number 7 is you increase debt repayments. You pay back the debt at a faster rate than otherwise. And this, of course, the argument is that if you pay back the debt even faster than you were before, this is an attractive thing for foreign investors. They feel more safe, that their money will be safe if they put money into the economy to develop it. Then number 8 is the reliance entirely on the private sector for investment, job creation, growth in output, exports, and so on. And all the indicators in the economy must be so structured as to provide incentives for the private sector, local and foreign, mostly foreign, to do all of these things, to achieve all of these objectives. 9, to rely especially on foreign direct investment for growth and job creation, There's an overlap with the previous point, but I single it out because that's where the main focus is, foreign investment, and therefore foreign control of the country. So this is the IMF package of measures that they structure in the form of conditionalities. And if you don't meet all of the targets that they set under each of these criteria, the money stops flowing, because they don't give you a loan of 5 million or 10 million or 50 million in one. They put it in tranches. Every 3 months, you get a piece of the money. So that the moment you miss any of the conditionalities, the loan is cut off, no more money. And you have to renegotiate on harsher terms. That's the system. Then now we come to the question of basically, economists tend to use, I'm giving the crude basic definition, but it's actually far more complicated than that in real life. An economy, based on this crude definition that economists tend to use, they say, Y is the economy, the whole economy, C is consumption, I is investment, G is government. So the formula they use is Y, economy, size of the economy, equals consumption, capital C, investment, capital I, and G, government expenditure. No, and then finally, exports minus imports. So the value of all of this. Here's the problem, where we say it's a demand squeeze model rather than a model based on increasing output, supply system, in other words. First of all, devaluation. Secondly, tax increases. Thirdly, wage freezes or serious cutbacks. Fourthly, cuts in government programs, namely reducing expenditures and therefore increasing the size of the primary surplus. I'll come back to that. Then the privatization of state assets, removal of price controls. All of these measures mentioned before have the effect of squeezing the amount of money in the hands of working people. It means they have less to spend. They're paying more taxes, mostly indirect taxes. which, as you know, are regressive, because the poorer you are, the smaller your income, is the higher the percentage of your income that's going to buy whatever products you buy for your livelihood and that of your family. So, and then they increase the rate of debt repayments. So all of these measures, when you increase the rate of debt repayments, it means you're taking some of the money out of the economy that could be used to improve health, improve housing, improve education, and so on. So all of these are ways of cutting the wages of workers, farmers, ordinary people in the economy, the benefits that people get that are fundamental social services like health, education, and so on. All these measures of demand squeeze. You're squeezing capital C, consumption. You're squeezing investment, local investment. You're squeezing government because you're demanding that the government have a balanced budget. In fact, it must do better than balance. It must have a surplus, which can be used to pay off the debt, the foreign debt especially, and so on. So all of that is squeezed. There's nothing in the package that is serious about expanding the economy, the supply side of the economy in that sense. Now, moving on, the IMF, therefore, just to list them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Devaluation, cutbacks in government expenditure, privatized state sector, remove price controls, wage restraints, and even freeze, and so on. And they, in the case of Grenada, they imposed all of these things, or tried to impose these things on us in '79, including they came with the position of no international airport. Now, let me be very technical here. All of the IMF teams, when they come to a country, including when they came to Grenada, they come as a joint delegation from the World Bank and the IMF. You know, top technical economists from both institutions sit together as if they are one delegation, even though they come from two separate international financial institutions, but their bosses are the same people, as we well know. And so they meet together. The World Bank was calling for no international airport. That is a lopsided development. That's going to spend most of the resources of Grenada in a way that is not going to be fruitful for the country and all of that. They argued this. They went on national and international media pushing this line. I mean, the World Bank was issuing press releases and all kinds of things to stop it. And here's the joke. Just about 3 months before they were pushing these policies, the World Bank report itself for 1982 and the early one before the March 13th revolution for 79, late 78, and then one in early 79 before March 13th, actually called for Grenada to build an international airport. And it called for assistance in doing that for the government. In other words, they explained why Grenada was going to go nowhere with a Pearls airport. You have to come over the mountains. The plane has to come over the mountains. It's not so safe. The runway is only 5,000 feet. It cannot take jets. It cannot take anything of that sort. It has no night landing facilities. Grenada must get an international airport. Literally, they spin on a dime. And within months, March 13th revolution come, we decide we're going to build that international airport. And all of a sudden, they say it is very bad for the economy to build it. It's going to be disruptive. It's going to be distorting in the investment profile of the country, and all kinds of arguments, the opposite of what they use in the World Bank report of late 78 and the one in early 79. So that's very interesting. The IMF kept quiet. They said nothing. The delegation said nothing. So they let the World Bank, part of the delegation, speak on that issue. World Bank spoke, and IMF spoke on all the other issues, but they left that one for the World Bank. Why, I don't know. So these are the things they demanded of us. They said devaluation. So I said to them, well, we have 7 countries, and all 7 countries have to agree for there to be devaluation because we have one currency, the Eastern Caribbean dollar. They said, yeah, but Grenada has great influence with the others. If you persuade them that's the right thing, they will follow, and therefore you will get unanimity, which is required to devalue the currency. So I said, well, your arguments for devaluation are well known, and they're all wrong. And that, and we had a whole debate about that. And I said, for example, you say that devaluation, what it does is it makes our currency cheaper, so our goods are cheaper for people to buy. And of course, foreign goods that we have to import become more expensive, so we'll reduce that. So then it means that when your currency is cheaper, it's an incentive for you to produce more because people will be demanding more of your product rather than the competitive product that some other country is producing. You know, if we are both producing the same product for export, and we are now 10% cheaper because we devalued by 10%, it means that we are going to get more of the orders. So I said, well, that's good theory. I've read that in textbooks myself, but it's totally irrelevant to most countries, third world countries, and it's certainly irrelevant to Grenada. They say, well, why you say that? I say, well, it's very simple. Your model is based on of having supply elasticity. In other words, when people are demanding more of our nutmegs or our cocoa, because we are now cheaper, it's cheaper to buy, the problem arises if we have no more to sell. How does that help us? All we end up doing is collecting less money. So if we lower the price by 10% because of the 10% devaluation, effectively lowering our price, we'll end up getting 10% less foreign exchange because we have no more nutmegs to sell. We are at full stretch. So they say, well, you can plant more nutmeg trees. I mean, it tells you something about the level of training of the IMF staff. So I said, well, do you know how long it takes when you plant a nutmeg tree before you can start reaping so as to export it? No idea. I say 11 to 14 years. So therefore, by the time you reach that 11 to 14 years from now, nobody knows where the world is. We can't rely on that. We devalue now, lose revenue now, and we're going to wait for 11 to 14 years. Cocoa, 3 to 5 years, depending on what model you use, and things like that. So that many countries can't do that. I say even take Jamaica. If Jamaica has its bauxite industry and if it has a lot of excess capacity, that could work. Just for that item, not for everything Jamaica produces. But if Jamaica is close to full capacity in its bauxite production, then having greater demand from the world because Jamaica's currency is now cheaper, its price of bauxite is now cheaper, doesn't help because they don't have any extra capacity. They've run out, they're close to full capacity, so they're not getting any benefit. So you have to know what the supply capacity or elasticity is to do that. And I pointed out the same thing with they talk about price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand, and point out all the points. I said, so therefore you come in a set of textbook foolishness and you don't work on the ground. You're ruining people's entire economy, right? With foolishness. Maybe that's deliberate, I don't know. But so we had those debates and they demanded that the state sector be privatized. I say, including those that are profitable. That's what they do all over the world. It doesn't matter if the state enterprise is making money. It must be privatized. That's dogma. So of course, we had quarrels with them the whole time over that. Wage restraints, same problem. Workers were getting a higher salary increase than the rate of growth in inflation in prices. And so that's how workers improve their income. That's how they get more real income, but they want that cut and so on. They wanted that all the money they would give us under the loan be used to pay back debt. Notice, to pay debt. So I said, well, listen, do you realize that the debt we have now is at a lower rate of interest? Most of it is at a lower rate of interest than the debt we're going to be getting, the interest rate we're going to be charged by the IMF for the IMF money. So we would be getting rid of paying off debt that is at very low interest rates to assume debt in order to do that, which is at a higher rate of interest. I mean, that is dunceness. That is absolute dunceness, right? So we had a lot of those types of discussions. And so I said to them, listen, this is our package, which was drawn up. By the way, we had a Grenadian guy who won the Island Skull in Grenada in the days when there was only one Island Skull every 2 years. Dave Boudou, he was a genius. He had worked both for the IMF and the World Bank a total of 25 years, 10 with one, 15 with the other. He knew that system inside out. He drew up our documents. He was thoroughly prepared. Because of him, we were thoroughly prepared. And as a result, we were able to say, this is the program we will accept because this will benefit us. This will expand our output. This will not stop us building our international airport, and so on and so on and so on, and increasing our port capacity and everything. So that's what we're going to do. So they say, well, that doesn't conform with IMF policies. So I said, well, bye-bye. They left without an agreement. And their big chiefs kept ringing to speak to me. For months, they kept ringing, hoping to influence me. And I told the secretary, don't take the call. You're not taking the call. My mother advised me that whenever you have tough negotiations with unreasonable people, your most powerful bargaining weapon is to keep silent, say nothing. And so they broke after 6 months. I went to IMF World Bank meeting in Yugoslavia that year. And Richard Fletcher, who was the Deputy Minister of Finance of Jamaica at the time, and he was very close to these World Bank IMF people. He knew them personally and so on. And he came over and he told me, he says, hold out, because after 4 this evening, the head of the IMF delegation to this meeting in Yugoslavia will come over and tell you the program that you all said, that's the only thing you're taking, you're not taking anything else. You're getting it. They're going to give you the program you want. But that enraged a certain country. They were enraged and they tried everything to reverse that. They didn't succeed. We got the funds and we used it exactly as we said we would. But then they offered us another program, a 3-year program, and that country said, no, you can't give them. And they came up with various excuses why we can't get it. Because we're not entitled to a 3-year program. We're only entitled to 1 year, standby, as they call it. And the head of the IMF at the time, Lavoisier, the French guy, he and his senior top staff sided with us in the debate. And what he decided with his top people was, if they won't give us for 3 years because of pressure from a certain country, we'll give you 3 one-year programs, because legally they could get away with it that way. So we got the money year by year, but it was arranged from the beginning that we'll get for 3 years, but we're getting it 1 year at a time. And that way they got around the legal problem, because that certain country was able to get enough countries to vote with them to stop us getting the 3-year deal. But they didn't have the power to stop the 1-year deal. The management could do that on their own, back in those days anyhow. So we had that situation. And so we were able to build our international airport. We were able to do all the main infrastructure projects, port expansion, et cetera, and we were able to spend money in opening 3 agricultural schools. There's one day before, upgrade it and build 3 more for young people, and various other programs we were able to implement, because we said we're not using 1 cent of that money to pay debt. We have debt at very low interest rates, very low interest rates. We are using this money to expand the economy, the supply side, in other words. All right. We refused the increases in taxes and all the things that they wanted. So moving on now, I want to move now to the fact that I would consider that the IMF, from looking at the history throughout the countries of the world, and before I say that, let me just show this book. It's by a Jamaican who's a professor of economics at one of America's universities. It's called The Debt Dilemma, IMF Negotiations in Jamaica, Grenada, and Guyana. So it deals with all of the actual negotiations we had with the IMF in Grenada during the revolution, the ones that Manley had during his time in the 70s, and the one that Seaga had during his time in the 80s, controlling the Jamaican economy. So it's all here. And it's published by Warwick University in Britain. Although this is his PhD thesis, by the way, this guy, now a professor of economics. And the name of the author is Horace Barthelot. Horace Barthelot. Well worth a read. Right?
Thanks.
Anyhow, back to this here now.
So let me just interrupt you a bit there, Vincent.
Sure.
How you doing? You got about 10 minutes or so? You must have some
or less,
questions. And I see Stephen's hand has been up a long time. He must be getting tired by now. And quite a few more.
Right.
Come on in.
Right.
Thank you. I should remind people they can put their questions in the chat as well. So we've got him there. So the questions can be succinctly put.
What I want to say finally is this, that the IMF has proven to be one of the most effective tools over the several decades for regime change in countries of the global south. One of the most effective ways. If you start by imposing sanctions in a country, if you start by doing all sorts of unequal trade arrangements and investment arrangements and so on, and you engage in some destabilization activity like happened in the 1970s in Jamaica and so on, and many other parts of the world, you create the groundwork for the IMF to come in because the country is running out of foreign exchange. At a certain point when you have no more foreign exchange and nobody will lend you money because you haven't been able to keep up with your debt payments, your foreign debt payments, it means that you have to go to the IMF. The only question is, do you go on your belly, or you only go on your knees, or you have to go on your belly? And that's when they have you over the barrel. That's when they can impose all of these conditions based on economic theories that are total nonsense, and they can exploit you, and they can more effectively take over and foreign control your economy, the policies and the practices and so on, both by the IMF itself through their conditionalities, but also by making the way easy for foreign investors to come in on very favorable terms and control things. So, and what happens is that it doesn't achieve the objectives it's supposed to achieve. It only immiserates the people, the working people of the country. So things get worse and worse and worse. It's a very effective way to destabilize the country and to cause regime change, as Manley would know very well from his experience. And he's spoken about it extensively. The fact of the matter, therefore, is that you have military invasions, you have coups, you have color revolutions. You know, there's a variety of techniques that imperialism has used to remove governments from power and put those that they like. One of the methods, and a very effective method because it doesn't involve invasion, it's not as costly, is in fact to use the IMF. So the IMF has been used in practice as a very powerful tool. The World Bank too, but not to quite the same extent, for foreign control, direct control, foreign indirect control, and when they have a government that they favor, the IMF agreements are usually more favorable to the country. When it's a government they want to get rid of, they hit you the full dose of medicine. And so the IMF has to be seen as a definite, effective instrument in many countries of imperialist and neocolonial rule and control. And most countries don't get out of it. They don't get out of it. They never quite make it. They keep getting IMF policy after IMF policy. Jamaica's had several over the years, right? And this is the problem. This is the problem, that you're talking about a tool that is even more effective than, in some respects, than sanctions. Not in all cases, but in many cases. And it's certainly less costly in every respect than military invasion. That is a last resort. But the IMF is the first resort. And so that's all I would say for now, you know, because time has run out.
Thank you so much, Winston. I'm sure people will want to applaud your presentation. I think, you know, put together in a neat little nutshell there that we could easily understand. So I thank you for that. And but the IMF has been discredited for some time now. Most people know the game, and I think in some ways they were almost promising to change their ways. I seem to remember there was a period of time when nobody seemed to be wanting to touch them. So how comes it seems to me like they've reinvented themselves? They've come back out. And that is one question. How has that gone about? And the other thing is, what are the alternatives? What can governments do to avoid the IMF? And then I'm going to take questions 3 at a time. I see there's lots of hands going up. It's best if you put up your virtual hand, because it'll be up there and it will line up with the others. So I will know when they've come. Herbert, you're number 4. Herbert Moore, you'll be number 4. There's 3 hands before you now. So you remember your number there. Okay. thanks. If you want to come in, you want to take that one now, Bernard, or you want to take
Yes, sure.
Yeah, okay. If you just reply to that one quickly, and then we get.
I just want to say one thing from what you just said, and that this book is useful for another reason, apart from what I mentioned before, and that is it explains that from his interviews with the IMF people and stuff, they saw Grenada as something to improve their image. Their image at the time was very bad. I mean, countries all over that took the IMF program, there were riots in the streets in Africa, in Latin America, everywhere. They had become a dirty word. And so they say, hey, this is a progressive government. It's doing things they can show us to try and attract others to take loans from them. They use Grenada. So that is why we were able to slip through and demand, this is what we're taking, and we're not taking anything from you if you don't give us what we want. All right, and we got away. And he gives the evidence for why that was the actual thinking of the people running the IMF, why we got obliged. So much so that Tom Adams, at the meeting in 1982, I think September of 82, in finance ministers, board of governors of IMF World Bank, which are the finance ministers in Canada, I think it was Toronto, he got up in the meeting and objected to the fact that the IMF was giving Grenada loans without all the usual conditionalities, which they were denying to Dominica, and they were denying to Guyana, and they were denying to Jamaica, and he went on and on and on and on, right? He literally got up in the plenary to attack the IMF for not giving the other Caribbean territories the breaks that Grenada was getting. We're getting the money without having to do this, no devaluation, no use of it to repay debt, no use of it for this, that, and all the other things. And of course, let's be frank, we couldn't use 1 cent of the IMF money to build the international airport. But money that we otherwise had to use for health, for education, for housing, etc., we used that to build the international airport, and then we used the IMF money to do the things. So we got around it. So technically, none of the IMF money helped to build the international airport. In practice, it did.
Yeah, thank you for that. We got to be smarter than them. Okay, I'll take 3 in a row now, Winston, and then you go. We've got Stephen Howard. You want to take the floor with your question, and then Paul Ward, and then Denny. No, Paul Ward, then Denny Grant. Yes, and right, those 3 for now. Stephen Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on where in the world you are. First off, a brief comment and a question. I think the IMF chose the appropriate initials for the way that they engage in their activities. I normally refer to them as the international MFs with their retrenchment policies. What I was really hoping to do was focus more on the resources which I've posted in the chat. The amount of gold, the natural resources, the oil that's in Haiti. I'm surprised when we talk, and I posted this in the chat, but I have to say it. I'm surprised whenever we come to talk about Haiti or things that impact an economy, we go through all these ideologies and histories and everything else instead of doing, as I posted again, like President Traore, what could we do to build the nation? What can we do to put the power of the people, the power in the hands of the people through the utilization of the natural resources? I do not hear this focus enough in these discussions. It's usually about the history, and we people come and they don't give, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how we could accomplish it. These are the examples that's already been laid on the ground. We need to develop those and implement them. How could these gang members have guns? Where are they getting the money from for the guns? They're sporting off all kind of bling, jewelry, chains around their necks, rings on your fingers. Where are they getting all this money from? Thank you.
Luke, you've muted yourself.
I was calling on Paul Ward because
sorry, Luke, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before Paul speaks, Herbert Moore had been raising his hand for some time. I think almost the entire meeting.
Yes. I gave him a number because I saw his hand after I saw Paul.
Okay. Oh,
So
sorry.
Herbert is coming in 4. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. I saw his hand. Paul, you want to come in with your question?
Yeah. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you very, very much for that very interesting talk. Really good to hear you. Just one question and a point before that. One of the conditionalities imposed on Jamaica in the early 90s was the liberalization of the financial sector, especially, which then collapsed. And when it was sorted out to some extent, it added 40% to Jamaica's debt. And we've been living with that ever since. So there's another very important point. In terms of my question, I wondered, I mean, I certainly fully agree with you about the IMF, but how do you think about the WTO? Because WTO distorted Jamaica's economy terribly ever since we gave into it. And as far as I've heard, Jamaica was one of the most willing victims of the WTO of any country in the world.
Great, thanks. We'll take one more question before we come back to you, Bernard. Danny Grant, you want to put your question quickly?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to Steve and to Winston, I'll call him, but it's meant to be by Bernard.
One of my names.
we all have these dual personalities, I'm sure.
No, it's more than that. Your form said first name. My first name is Winston. Yes.
Well, I'm going to pick on Winston because Steve said a lot of interesting things and we could discuss for a long time. I'm not such the historian, but I'm fascinated by the mechanisms in terms of the economy and how it's manipulated. Bernard's talked about foreign investment being a key thing and one of the strategies that the IMF and the World Bank uses. And to narrow it down, tourism becomes the modern version of extraction, and it has obviously worldwide appeal. You know, Jamaica in 2023, I believe, was one of the leading destinations across the world for tourists to go to. I'm going to ask a question at the end, but just to lead up to that, the penny dropped for me if it needed to. When I was coming in recently, passing some new hotels in the process of just being built or just being opened. And I was having a conversation with the driver as to who potentially would be owning those. And of course, the answer is they're all foreign investors. And then the workers in the hotels tend to be foreigners brought in at the upper echelons, the management structures and so forth, the administration. And then for the menial task and lower down, they have local workers, but the local workers are never on anything like a permanent contract. They actually give them casual workers, 0 contracts. And as soon as they get to I think it's a maximum of 3 months, then they're laid off and they're not re-employed. So they never get a foothold in the hotel or in the job so that they can build up and save some money. And then curiously, because these are all booked from abroad, the money actually probably never touches the shores of Jamaica. It's taken elsewhere before it even gets here, never gets here. So there's not really much of a profit or benefit to the country itself. And Jamaica is not, it's one example of many where they're not benefited, it seems, even from the tourism, which is increasing all the time. So I'm kind of minded by the plea that was made by Dr. Bobby Hunter, I think it was, about action. If we know this and we're aware of it, and we try and increase awareness more broadly, if we can't reform these things and mechanisms, can we replace them? Where's the point of action that we could actually take? And I'm looking to Bernard and others to guide us in this. How can we change the mechanism so that the country actually does benefit from these strategies?
Great, thank you. Okay, Winston, you got 3 to bite at there for now.
All right.
Bernard, there you go.
All right. Let me say this first of all, that your first commentator and questioner raised a very important issue of natural resources and their proper utilization, and a proper national plan for their utilization in a way that benefits the country and not foreigners. The vital point that he's raising there, that has to be at the center of any serious planning for economic development of any country. The second point is the one about the economy in terms of foreign ownership of the hotels and so on. Yeah, there are a lot of problems there. We have ecological and we have cultural problems there. We have a situation where, according to some estimates, between 97 and 99% of our best beaches in Jamaica no longer have, Jamaicans cannot access them. They've been privatized effectively by blocking the way for Jamaican people to be able to get to the beach, to use the beaches. Our vendors, our local vendors have been kicked out where they used to be on the beaches and near the different venues and so on. And now you have to go to certain approved vendors and shops and so on, many of them foreign owned, for the tourists to buy things, which means less money will stay in the country. You have the situation where 70 cents in the dollar, according to the Minister of Tourism some years ago, recent years, 70 cents goes out. In other words, 30 cents is what stays in Jamaica. That's not strictly correct. On some estimates, it's correct, but in another sense, it's not correct. Let me explain. When you buy when a tourist buys their ticket in Canada, America, Britain, wherever, they're paying for the airfare there. They're paying the travel agent there. They're not using Jamaican travel agents. They're not ringing into Jamaica to use travel agents. They use the ones up in New York or wherever. They book their hotel, which is mostly foreign hotels. They pay for both the meals as well as the room. So in other words, even the meals are paid for before they come, all inclusive. The entertainment in the hotels, all of that is paid up if the tourist is coming from whichever part of Europe or North America. So that, in fact, very little comes in. Enough comes in to pay the low wages for locals and to pay electricity and telephone bill and internet, things like that. That's what comes in. I guess that's the 30 cents in every dollar that the minister was referring to. But here's the problem. Because of the nature, the structure of the economy and the consumption pattern of our people, most of our items that we consume, even the poorest of our people, a large percentage of what we get in clothes, in shoes, in food items even, are imported items, even the materials we use to put up our homes. So in other words, out of that 30 cents that actually comes in from the tourist dollar, most of that 30 cents goes out in these different ways. The import content of what our Jamaican workers in the hotel sector actually get, they then spend a high percentage of it on imported items. So that's another problem. Because we don't have sufficient, what economists call intersectoral linkages. In other words, the linen, the bedding, all of that stuff in the hotels should be made locally, right? The food, all the items, not the cooking of the food, that's local, but I'm talking about all the ingredients. Some are locally sourced, let's be frank, but many are not. You have a lot of imported tins and bottles and whatnot and so on. So even some of the food that the tourists eat is not very different from where they came from. So in other words, there are lots of different ways in which the actual amount that stays in the country, 30 cents might come in every dollar. The amount that stays is a fraction of that 30 cents in every dollar. So this is a real problem in terms of a development strategy, right? Where intersectoral linkages, which will increase the multiplier effect. It means that when a dollar is spent, more and more of the dollar stays and goes from the shopkeeper to the shopkeeper's own purchases for his family, who he buys from and so on. The dollar spins around. That's what we mean by the multiplier. The $1 multiplies into $2, $3, $4, depending on the extent to which more and more stuff is bought from each other within the local economy. We're not thinking enough about that. Next point. Then he made the point about external shocks, economic shocks. Well, 9/11 caused plane flights and our tourist industry to collapse for a while. Remember when the Twin Towers collapsed back in 9/11? You have that. 2008, when there was a financial meltdown, that also affected the arrival of tourists. So there are a number of these types of things. Even sometimes there are wars taking place in countries far away from us, and yet it has a spillover effect on the arrival of tourists. And any economic difficulty that America has, I mean, I'll give you just one off the top of my head. There are now large numbers of high-rise office space buildings in different American cities that are now a time bomb. Approximately 200 banks in America could fail any day. Nobody knows when they will collapse. When a few start collapsing, it has a kind of ricochet effect, and many more collapse. It could bring the whole thing down, including the stock market, the bond market, etc. Just by that. What caused that? COVID-19. In COVID-19, apart from the 45 million Americans, for example, that were thrown out of work by the thousands of businesses that closed down, those that stayed open and their offices were in these high-rise buildings and so on, the workers stayed home and worked from home using the computer, the modern technology, the Zoom and all that. So as a result, when COVID finished, after the strength of it finished after 3-4 years, most people, a high percentage, I think as much as 50% in some states, continue to stay home. The employers discovered that their productivity did not fall from working from home, and indeed in some cases rose, because they no longer have a 1-hour drive to and another 1-hour drive away from work. They didn't reach work tired and go home tired before they come the next day. So as a result, a higher and higher percentage of the American economy, and some in Europe too, and in England, people are working from home and producing as much or more than they were when they travel all this distance to go to the office. As a result, a majority of the office space, some places more than 70% of all office spaces in these big office buildings in Chicago and this city and that city are now losing money. The people who bought these properties or built these properties are not able to keep up with their payments to the banks. Now the banks rely heavily for a lot of that money. That's easy money for them. They provide the loans and these people pay them back. It used to work before COVID. Now, with a change in the cultural work habits of people no longer going to office, it has meant that these buildings are now teetering. People don't want to buy them even for 30% of the original price. They don't want to buy them. The banks now are holding a set of money. They're underwater. They're holding money that they cannot, in fact, recover from these people. And nobody is going to buy a building that is no longer making money to bail out the fellows who own it now. So what I'm saying is that at any moment, the banks would fail. Now, why am I saying that in the context of the point Danny made? I just gave one. I could give you at least a dozen examples in different aspects of the economy, where what we in the Caribbean face is what we call external economic shocks. 9/11 happened in New York, but it had economic shocks. Our tourism collapsed for a while. The COVID thing, tourism collapsed again. This possible disaster with the banking sector linked to the COVID, the spillover, years later, that could cause that. So there are lots of different wars could cause that. The time when they were under Trump, number one, remember he had brought warships close to the Venezuelan coast, and there was all that kind of talk. If a war breaks out with Venezuela, you know that must affect the Caribbean, and so on. So the fact of the matter is, in fact, the war in Ukraine affected supplies of food, you know, from that part of the world to the global south, and so on. My point is, therefore, that there are external economic shocks, which mean that tourism is one of the most vulnerable areas of our economy. So is this citizen by investment, CBI policies, and so on. These things are very vulnerable, right, to external economic shocks. And so we not only have the problem of what hurricanes and earthquakes and mountain volcanic eruptions can do to our economy, but things happening in other countries from which our tourists come, from which our items we buy come, etc., the financial system and so on, could cause us to go through some severe hardship, right? And when we build an industry so much around tourism and external products like that, we mean we are more vulnerable. When things are going good, they're going good, but it is very vulnerable, and we have to bear that in mind in terms of the point that the first questioner and commentator made, the importance of a proper planning, right, to take into account vulnerabilities, in addition to his point about the utilization of resources, natural resources, in a meaningful way to benefit our people. Forgive me for that long answer.
Thank Winston. I'm just, the hands are stacking up, so I think you, and the time is running
My
against
apologies.
us. So No, no, it's okay. It's great we get some good comprehensive answers. We've got Herbert Moore, and then we've got Cecil Gutsmore and Joseph Antoine in that order. And then there's another two. So we need to be tight with your comments and questions, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
And lady, I think up there, come on. Okay.
Okay.
Come in,
I'd like
Herbert.
to thank everyone. I am here in South Carolina in the United States. I have learned so much this morning. I would like to paraphrase a statement by Malcolm X with respect to the IMF and the World Bank. One is the fox, the other is the wolf. Their approach to the lamb is different, but the end result is the same. They intend to have you for supper. Last comment, if you check the news, YouTube, President Tory of Burkina Faso, and I think Mali and one other country, is accomplishing what Mugabe and I thought Nelson Mandela had accomplished, but Burkina Faso is the new Haiti. The countries are causing the European capitalists to have nightmares. And if you're not familiar with what's going on over there, please check it out, because that's exactly what the rest of the world, people of color, must do. Turn inward and use their own natural resources. And just quickly to respond to where did these people in Haiti, did they get the bling bling, the gold and so forth and so on? Someone mentioned it already. It's the bourgeoisie sheepdog traders that's selling the country out. They're causing the turmoil to bring in the European capitalists to take over again. Thank you very much to all.
Luke? Luke,
Sorry,
are
I'm
you
busy.
there?
I'm busy calling on Cecil and talking to myself. Cecil, please come
Are
in.
you calling on it? Right, very, very briefly. Let me thank you for both these extraordinary presentations, which I don't think go too well together, to be absolutely honest. And so I hope that in an early month, both of these topics will return for fuller discussion. Because Bernard was extraordinary in relation to the difference between revolutionary planning in the face of the IMF, as opposed to what was happening in Jamaica or in these other places. And there's enormous scope for discussing and understanding all of that. On Steve's also extraordinary presentation, somebody asked, a sister asked about action. And I'm reminded, because us Caribbean activists obviously are always concerned about Haiti. And more than a decade ago, I was involved with something that we called Haiti First, Haiti Now, which was to do with campaigning to get France and the United States in different moments to give Haiti back what they ripped off from Haiti, the US in the 20th century and France in the 19th and 20th century. And this whole issue about how we as the world, or as diasporan Africans or Africans generally, should organize to get this money back for Haiti is, seems to me, an important matter. I actually, believe it or not, raised this with Norman Durban when he was Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. And what we were talking about at the time was the possibility of a UN resolution through the General Assembly that would try to mobilize internationally support for Haiti for the recovery of the stolen resources. What Norman pointed out at the time was that in the absence of a Haitian government actually asking for this money to be returned, it's almost impossible to get any kind of international resolution through any international body. And when it turns out to be the case that the US is the entity that's actually setting Haitian governments in place in Haiti, the impossibility of that move coming about. And as somebody pointed out, actually, maybe Steve, that the president of Haiti who made the demand for the return of this money was removed from power and exiled and so on. So these matters need fuller discussion, and I thank both Bernard and Steve for the extraordinary wide-ranging presentation that they made for us. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Cecil. Next, Joseph, you want to put your question? And Coco, if you're still there, after Joseph. Are you there, Joseph? No, Joseph?
Yes, I'm here. Somebody was just calling in on the phone. Good morning. I mean, hello, Luke, and also I'm extremely pleased with Comrade Bernard and Steve for the presentation. But I will ask somebody.
We lost you there for a minute.
Sorry, somebody is trying to call me on the phone.
All right, Joseph, we'll come back to you because time is running tight on us now. Should we go to Ronald? You want to come in now, and then we'll come back to Joseph.
Yeah, hi, good day all. Very interesting discourse. I'm a postgraduate student at the University of the West Indies and a secondary school teacher. All right.
Okay.
I would just like to have a question, and I'd just like to add a point regarding the tourism and the hotel industry. What I have observed as well is that some of the arrangements and the deals that are signed off on by our Caribbean governments handicap us even more. While we were looking at in terms of the revenue, the downstream revenue, I'm a bit familiar with the fact that sometimes governments actually give the land as well as finance the building of some of these hotels, which again, from a financial point of view, I am unable to see the major benefit from an economic point of view, right, for the country that is entertaining such an arrangement, right? So really and truly serious thought and reflection need to go into how we engage, how our governments engage, and at the end of the day, I guess that responsibility falls on us in terms of being more involved and more active in educating our people as to, the power that we have as individuals, right? My question is, how do we use regionalism do you think the promotion of regionalism, not from a top-down model, but from a bottom-up model, do you see that as being one of the ways in which, as a Caribbean people, we may be able to get ourselves to that point where we are in a better position when it comes to negotiating with these external financial agencies and governments? Because we have tried the regionalism and somehow the top-down model where governments seem to sell it as though it's something inorganic. It doesn't work. Whereas in truth and in fact, it's already there. Regionalism is there. From my point of view, a Trinidadian will have Grenadian, Vincentian family and so on. And it runs, that thread runs throughout. but yet somehow it is presented as something that people end up fearing because of the top-down instead of the bottom-up. So,
okay,
yeah.
Steve,
thank
Luke,
you,
could I
thank you
come in
very
here?
much, Roland. Okay, Joseph,
Yeah,
put your,
yeah,
put your
okay.
question.
Yeah,
And that will
somebody
be the
was trying
last,
to,
sorry, that'll be
okay.
the last question to you now, Bernard, coming from Joseph,
Yeah,
and then you can take it.
I was saying, I'm very happy with comments, Bernard and Steve. But I would like to direct my question to Comrade Bernard. In terms of the IMF programs that Grenada follow, what have been the fundamental difference between, especially the ones under the NNP and then under the various, also the NDC government? And also, people saying that Mia Mottley is a champion of the Caribbean and also whatever. But one of the first things Mia did was to go to the IMF, and also she has remained utterly silent. No, utterly silent when it comes to the Sahel. I mean, what do you think about that? Maybe I don't know if that is asking too much. What do you think about that? Because people still believe that Mia is the best thing that happens to the Caribbean, which I don't think, and some of my people, some of my folks don't think also. Thank you very much.
Right. First of all, the question of the tourism industry and downstream revenue and so on is a very important point, very, very important point. And it links in to what I was mentioning earlier, but without developing it, the importance of intersectoral linkages, the importance of the crafts, the linen used in the tourism industries, the meat, the fish, the this, and some of that is happening. But I'm talking about the scale and therefore the impact on the economy of much greater linkages between all the others in furniture, the furniture that you, all different things, the linkages between local production in other sectors, especially those favoring local artisans and small people, and the hotels. That's an important dimension of the question of downstream revenue, right? Because it links the hotels into the other sectors. I also think that that apart from that, there are ecological, physical ecological, and cultural ecological damages. I hinted at one dealing with the fact that local people can't get to their best beaches now, and things like that. That's a cultural and social issue, in addition to ecological damage of too much tourism, of a certain kind of tourism, and so on. But anyhow, that's one thing. Apart from that, you have the question of the bottom-up model. That's important. That's very important. You know something? We had a series of, first of all, we brought back 27 Grenadians, highly qualified Grenadians, working with the World Bank, the IMF, the this, the that, CARICOM Secretariat, the leading division. We brought them back within the first 2 weeks of the revolution to help to build the country. They're all willing. I mean, some of them literally gave their bosses, because they had sympathetic bosses, because they were outstanding. So some were able to give only 1 weekend's notice that they're going off to Grenada to help build the country. Dave Budu was an example of that. Alva James was another example. Lots of examples of that. Here's my point. When you're able, when you have all of these people, including we had several top economists from Jamaica, from Guyana, from Trinidad and Tobago, from St. Lucia, and from Barbados. And they came in, and the thing that they all commented on, some of them have actually put it in print. They were astonished when at the annual meeting where 1,000 delegates, or geodesic dome on the Grenada's beach, held 1,000 people, 1,000 seats. And people would elect farmers, workers, women, youths, etc., would elect their delegates. And altogether, there was 1,000 delegates. Remember, the whole country was, at that time, was 90,000 people. So that's a high percentage, right, of delegates. And they would come up with all kinds of ideas for what should be done economically. And these are the technocrats, most of them with PhDs and others with, but they're all teaching at university and so on. And their minds were blown. They said, we've never had a situation where ordinary farmers and ordinary workers from all different villages were coming, and they're coming with ideas and asking probing questions of us that we had to answer. He said that gave them more education than what they had got for their degrees at university. This is the comment, some of it is in print, right? That these technocrats, high-skilled technocrats from the whole region, plus the many that came from Grenada came back home, 27 of them in just the first 2 weeks, were saying about the importance of that bottom-up criticism, offering advice on how to handle import bill, what imports to take in, what not, the export trade, the question of processing or stuff and so on. So that it was quite extraordinary. And occasionally, people would come up with an idea, and we had to answer them. Before the budget was presented, we had to reply to every suggestion. So several people, for example, said we should hit sin taxes very hard, collect more revenue from cigarettes and liquor and those type of items than you do from things that people need to use, must use regularly. And we had to point out to them, because we had to answer every one of those points. We had to point out to them that the truth of the matter is that in the case of the so-called sin goods, tobacco and liquor, Gary had in fact raised the taxes on those for similar reasons, and revenue fell. You raise the tax, which should collect more revenue, but revenue fell. Smuggling took over, right? The nearby islands, schooners and boats kept coming in now with smuggled cigarettes and smuggled liquor. Then Gary lowered the tax back to where it was before, and government collected more revenue. So we had to point out that there are situations where it sounds good, but it doesn't work in practice because of A, B, C, and D. But the overwhelming majority of the suggestions had merit. And so that's coming from the bottom. So I think the contributor here who made this suggestion that there needs to be a lot more involvement of ordinary people in preparing the strategic plan for our territories is an important one. Let me just say that, because I know we're out of time. Let me say that in respect to Mia Motley and Barbados, that the economy crashed. Barbados defaulted on its debt massively on the day before she took over, literally on the day. And it's on her first day following victory that she called in the IMF and other creditors to work out something with them. So I think we have to take that into account. That's not to argue that the specifics of what was worked out with them was the best. I'm not arguing that because I don't know the specifics, but I'm just making the point that the previous government, which had been there for 10 years, had not managed the economy that well, putting it as tactfully as I can. And as a result, there was a problem in which the creditors, in other words, Barbados at one stage had AAA credit rating. Barbados, both parties, no matter who was in power, Barbados' economy was handled better than all the other islands of the Caribbean. Even though certainly at that time they didn't have oil, they didn't have gas, they didn't have bauxite, they didn't have stuff like that. So that that's our starting point. Now I can't comment, because I don't know the facts as to how she operated the policies and what were the terms and conditions under which she took had arrangements with the creditors. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll just make the point that literally on the day she took over, there was a massive default of Barbados debts across the board. So you have to bear that in mind. That's not to deal with the cogent criticisms of how things have been going since. I'm not on top of that.
Right. Thanks for that, Bernard. We'll just take one more question, and then we have to close the meeting. We've already gone over time. So I hope people will stay with us for a little moment more. We've got David Denny. You get a chance. A sharp question. Thank you.
Well, I'm David Denny from Barbados. I do agree with the last speaker in relation to the situation in Barbados. But the conditions today is worse than 2018 when we changed the government. So that the condition is worse for our working class people. But in relation to the Haitian situation, I am very, very, very interested in this discussion. And as Caribbean people, we need to do something very, 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 very serious in relation to helping our Haitian people. Because I feel CARICOM have let down the Haitian people. I think what Haiti needs today is a strong developmental program for Haiti. And this program can be led by CARICOM and other Caribbean nations, but I think it should include Cuba and Venezuela, who are the two leading countries that have assisted the Haitian people during crisis situations and periods in Haiti. You have Cuba with over 400 medical workers. You had Haiti helping in the housing industry after the earthquake. And I think this is the area that we should be looking at, because sending military and police personnel to Haiti is not the answer or the only question in terms of dealing with the Haitian situation. So I just want to share that point.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, thanks very much. I think we've exhausted our questions there, so we'll just close now. And Winston, if you want to leave us with any thoughts before you bow out on us, Bernard? Any thoughts?
Let me just say this: that I am very deeply happy to know that so many of our people, including the panelists here, the speakers here today, but our people generally are more and more calling for strategic planning, economic planning, educational planning for certain sectors, modern sectors of the economy that are required now, especially a completely different system of education that would seriously have us be able to take off economically. That is the direction. And we're not seeing the progress in this. We're not seeing that yet. And that concerns me. But we have a set of folks at this meeting with enormous experience in life. And therefore, I think that all of us should take on the challenge made by one of the last speakers of the importance of a bottom-up approach, approaching people and discussing seriously with them how we could transform education in a way that will help us to transform the economy, and how we could develop out of that a proper strategic economic plan for the region.
Thanks. Steve, you want to add any closing remarks before we finish the meeting?
No, I mean, I know I started looking at it as from a historian's point of view. I think that there is a continuation from the way they started in 1825 to what they're doing in 21-25. It's same meat, but it's just a different sauce. But it's the same body. So I think that, and I particularly like Bernard's remarks about it's got to come from the bottom up. It's got to be the ordinary people, the workers, the farmers, the students. In the countries where there was a successful resistance to this, in the Caribbean, we look at Cuba and Grenada. That started, both those revolutions started when ordinary workers, ordinary students, ordinary farmers decided they'd had enough and they wanted better. And what we in Europe can do is do all we can to support those movements in the Caribbean that want to do that.
Great, thank you, Steve. I'm sure everybody will join me in showing appreciation for both speakers.
Thank you.
It certainly has been a very educational meeting in a precise and concise way that is easily understandable for most, and it's the kind of education we need coming from bottom up, as you put it just now. So thank you very much. And also I need to thank everyone who has joined this meeting today. And for all your questions, I think it's been a remarkable meeting in many ways. And I know it will be on the recording, so if you need to go back and get some of the information that was presented to us, it's always there. Thank you all so much.
Can you inform people how they can get a copy of the recording, Luke?
I think it comes to everybody. I think
it's on the list.
Sends it, yeah, once they've registered for the meeting. Yes.
I shall. I'll put it on. It'll be up on the
website,
on the CLS website. Will be up there by the middle of next week at the latest, probably earlier. I will circulate everybody, and also while we're at it, if you look at the CLS website, you will find how to join Caribbean Labour Solidarity, which is something that I hope some of you will consider doing. Thank you.
Okay, with that, thank you all very much, and see you at the next Zoom meeting on the first Sunday of June coming up. Thank you.